Good afternoon. Welcome to the Frontier Science House, where we celebrate the power and the importance of transformational science. I'm the director of the Frontiers Planet Prize, which is a prize created by Frontiers 3 years ago to become, in all modesty, the Nobel Prize for Sustainability. And we want to have a worldwide competition whereby the best scientists, based on a published article, get each $1 million to pursue their science, and the science has to be related to how can we keep the planet healthy, in a nutshell. So it's very simple, but it's a gigantic challenge, of course. And this panel fits perfectly well into that remit, because the panel is all about how can we rethink cities with science so that they are at the part of the solution of the planetary health crisis and not only the problem. Why? Because cities for the moment account for 60 to 70% of the world population. In Europe, 70% of all Europeans live in urban areas. Worldwide, it will be going to 50-60% very soon. And not only that, cities are also accountable for close to between 70, according to the estimates, between 70 or 80% of the global gross domestic product, which means not only in terms of population, but in terms of economic activity, that cities are the first to endure the consequences of the planetary change and the planetary crisis. And conversely, if we solve these issues of climate change, of greening, of sustainability and so on in cities, it means that we solve a major part of the problem. So that is actually what our panel is all about. And I'm extremely happy that we have a fantastic panel here brought together with different complementary points of view, which will guide you through this problem and, as you will hear, also point to some of the solutions and pathways of the future. So to start with, we have Alice Charles, who is the director. He's one of the directors, so he's not the only director, of Arup. For those who know Arup, it's a worldwide company with mainly an engineering company, very heavily involved into all kinds of things that cities do and in building. She's also on the board of the Wholesome Foundation, which is precisely dedicated to the topic of the city of the future. Then we have Zahra Kalantari, who is a professor of environmental science in Stockholm. She was one of the winners of the Frontiers Planet Prize this year. My standard joke is this is one of the few scientists who are a millionaire because she got 1 million to pursue her science, and she will explain in your intervention what exactly you brought into and why you got that prize, but she's a leading voice in the greening of cities, put it simple. Then we have Bart Becks here, who is on the board of the European Innovation Council, which is, I used to be at the European Union, and I saw the birth of it. It's one of the most successful things the European Union did together with the European Research Council, but the European Innovation Council is mainly interested in how can we take brilliant science into brilliant startups and unicorns and so forth. Bart is a digital entrepreneur and has a very big interest in how AI can contribute to the future of cities. And then finally, we have also someone who is really responsible for cities, which is Conradin Cramer. In Switzerland, they call him the president of the government of the Canton of Basel-Stadt. We call them a mayor. That's in plain language, this is a mayor. That's how we know these people. But a very important city, of course, and also a mayor, if I can take the shortcut, Conrad, who has dedicated his part of his policy and passion to how cities can be at the forefront of greening and why it is important and so on. So we have science, we have engineering, we have entrepreneurs, and we have a political responsible person to guide us through this discussion. So we will have it in 2 rounds of discussions, and at the end of the panel, there will be Q&A for anyone wanting to intervene, so towards 11 o'clock. So let us start with the first question. As I said, as I mentioned, as I tried to highlight, cities are part of the problem and part of the solution. There is a lot of science floating around. There is a lot of science being produced. There is a lot of innovation going on. But what exactly do we need to do more in order to bridge the world of science and ideas into the world of the cities and into greening them? So I would first like to give the floor to Zahra, because that's exactly what you worked on with your winning article. Zahra, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I think as a scientist, first of all, what we need to do to understand the problem. So which sort of challenges we are dealing with in our cities, and then if you want to have green transition, so what does it mean? And as a scientist, I believe that we have the power, we have the intelligence to be able to work and to produce the science, the evidence-based science that can help cities, to help them to be able to step in and then do better work for achieving this green transition. So what I believe is that, okay, we need the science, we need the evidence-based science, so bring in the science, but at the same time, we also need technology. So we need to step in and then working on the green technology and also on the digitalization tools to be able to help our science to get, to be able to monitor it, to maintenance it, and also to be able to scale it up. And besides that one, I believe that we need also governance. We need cities to be with us, working with us, because without governance, we cannot scale. We cannot scale fairly. So all these three things should come together: science, technology, and governance.
Okay, then we will take that up later on. But Alice, from your point of view, what are the bottlenecks to achieve exactly what Zahra was saying from your experience as a worldwide engineering company?
So first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for coming along today. The Secretary General of the United Nations often says the battle for climate will be won or lost in cities. I've heard him saying it many times and totally agree. But if we break that down, what exactly do we need to do if we're going to transition our cities? So I'm going to outline 4 areas. There's many other things that we need to do, but these are the primary things we need to concentrate on. So first of all, where do the majority of our emissions come from? They come from buildings, they come from energy, and they come from transport. So, different cities have different mixes, but broadly they're those 3 big things. And the final thing that many cities fail on is compactness. A lack of compactness contributes to emissions in all areas. So if cities are going to drive change, they need to transform our buildings, our energy, our transport, and create compact urban development. If I start to look at just a couple of examples there, so over the last year, I've been really lucky to chair the Earthshot Prize, a public sector working group, which in essence was the cities working group that sought to identify, leading city solutions across the world that were addressing climate change. And the winner, one of the winners of the prize was Bogota. So why did Bogota win? Bogota won because not only has Bogota got an urban development model of 70% of the city being preserved for nature and developing on 30% of the city. But most importantly, it has an amazing strategy around how it's drove the transformation of its mobility sector. So it's not only getting people walking and cycling, using buses and using other transportation. So it's the strategy that they've drove, and the really interesting thing has been, it's been across successive mayors. It doesn't matter, which political leader is in power, they have a strategy, they're moving forward in the right direction in terms of, decarbonising their city. I think just another example that I'm going to talk about from the compactness side is just yesterday, C40, which is a leading mayoral network that we partner with, that works with 97 leading cities around the world. We've been working with them and urban partners on looking right across Europe about what we need to do to drive urban regeneration. So in every single city in the world, there is so many, vacant buildings, unused sites, industrial sites, etc. So we've been looking at the success factors that you need to employ to actually drive change in our cities. So we need to scale urban regeneration. It will help us solve our housing crisis. The final thing I will say, in terms of those areas that we need to transition, one of the things that cities often fail to do is think about what is the critical pipeline of projects that we need to deliver to transition our city, and what's our investment plan. So if we look at some of the work we've been doing with the EBRD, and actually somewhere like Tirana is a really good example, or we've also done it in Warsaw. There you look at what is the emissions profile of your city? Okay, what critical infrastructure projects do you need to implement to address those emissions? but now how do we get investors interested in our city and interested in driving those projects? So I think we're often quite good at identifying our problems, possible solutions, but not thinking about the investment piece, and that's critically important.
But Bart, you're an entrepreneur, you're an investor, you're working on a big project to bring precisely the world of investment closer to renewal of cities and redesign of it. So how do you see this articulation from your point of view?
I see it as a very smart remark. Well, if you start from two aspects, one, that main change can be driven from cities where 70% now probably will live there, and so that's the major drive for change. There's a second one. I fundamentally believe, like others, while there's some criticism, that technology has created a better world. If we look at the last 50 years, the impact on technology has been tremendous on every level. Right, from healthcare to how we move to the freedom of wisdom, so that knowledge is not longer an isolated element, but freely accessible to the world. That brings us now to a new layer where AI can be an accelerator of doing good thanks to cities. We're now confronted in an era where AI, we only basically publicly launched 3 years ago, has such a tremendous impact on everything, yet we use it very little in order to drive change in our cities. What are the 3 things we probably all want? That it's a healthier city, that it's better governed, and that it kind of helps us in having an entrepreneurial local venturing where, you know, without too many hassle, you can start and launch things. Some cities have great examples, but everybody's completely isolated. In a world where AI on 3 years' time, that people say it's a bubble, yes or no, whatever. OpenAI yesterday announced that they're at 20 billion revenue, right? 20 billion in 3 years' time. We've never seen that kind of growth, so that will not decelerate, that will accelerate. And I think we should now capture it and let not AI govern cities, but help cities to govern thanks to AI, to getting to better examples and learn from each other. And if you look at it, it looks fairly close to how companies scale. At a certain moment you invest, you go through different periods, and you have this kind of public-private partnership where you have the effect, but you need to create that kind of knowledge. And one of the projects that you were referring to is called the AI Polis. So we're launching an initiative where we want to bring in a first step knowledge and share between cities what works on all these domains. But it could go much further. And to highlight on that, I was on Saturday morning in Munich. There was a fantastic conference called DLD, and Henry, one of the founders here at Frontiers, was speaking there, and they're working on the brain project. What's the exact name of the?
Innate, the company, yes.
It's fantastic. Talking with him, you could also say, well, why don't we have a city AI brain, where you blend in the data from your city, you get everything that works, and you have a brain that helps you in taking decisions. The central point in everything AI is that we have to see it as giving us the data much more, but we have to keep human central. Critical thinking and critical overthought is going to be central, but if you have that kind of a city brain where you regroup all the good practices and you have the data, what an incredible resource to do better for cities. So that can also be part of AI Polis, which we're basically launching today.
Thank you very much, Bart. We will for sure come back on that idea later on. Conradin, you as a mayor, so you're at the forefront and actually the main responsible for Basel, but as a political person, we hear here that in part of the missing link is the governance, of course, and before preparing this panel, I did a bit of a Google search trying to find mayors with your profile. Not so many, but meaning mayors who are really putting healthy cities at the top of their priority agenda. I mean, they all pay lip service to it, but you do a lot of real work on it in Basel. So what is your take on what you heard up till now, and how does it come that we don't see more more cities going the road you take in Basel?
Well, thank you. To put it very frankly, as a politician, I need 2 things. I need votes and I need money. And in Basel, I have the votes to climate neutral goal not in 2050 but in 2037 for the whole city. I have a goal for our administration to be climate neutral by 2030. And that was approved in a public referendum. So this is Swiss direct democracy. That helps because it gives legitimation. And the other thing, of course, you need the money for the initial investments. And that is something we are lucky to have in Switzerland. And then, as you said, it was not very charming, in fact, but you said it shouldn't depend on the politician in charge. It should depend on a strategy. And that's what we did. After the referendum, we made a strategy and an actionable plan. And then it is important, and you said everything, Alice, to concentrate on the main factors. And the main factors are not, let's say, garbage separation and the recycling of glass. It's, as you said, energy, housing, or buildings, and transportation. And then I have to know, with data, with better data than we have now, where can I have the best and fastest impact, where can I be most effective with the money put in to really make a difference. And there we are still missing some data. It's progressing. And it's incredibly important to have the information from other cities, but also from your own city. And then I need technical solutions, of course. I need standardized solutions who are affordable. But on the other hand, I need tailored ways to do it in my city. Basel is a medieval city, very narrow streets, very densely built. So I need a different approach than a city with, let's say, American roads. And so this combination, standardized technique, basic technology, and tailored solutions for the respective city. I think then we have the mixture together to move forward.
Thank you. And indeed, I think this is this sounds very logical and plausible. But then I would like to ask the question: do we have enough science and technology already available, and innovation culture and investment culture available to go that way? Because we seem to know what way to go. Of course, we cannot know where we should go in 10 years' time, but you make the future, you predict the future by making it. So what more need to be done there so that we make it attractive for the scientific, technological, and investment community to go down that road? And I would like to, Bart, can you start with that?
I can. Basically, I think that we have the tools of the 21st century to do that, but a bit the governance systems of a century ago. Meaning that we still govern in quite isolation, looking at our own data, but there's so much available that could be embedded in that decision making. And we have to look at technology to help in that. Yesterday I had a talk about Silicon Valley for me being nearly a city is linked to a company. We talked about that yesterday evening. She has we can ask her some questions after. She has a great experience in that. What we don't do yet at this moment is scale that up. We're talking in Europe about how should we have more strategic autonomy? How should we go faster? Yesterday, von der Leyen announced finally what we call the 28th state. So EU Inc. basically means that instead of creating a company in one country, you create a company here in Switzerland, then you want to go to France, you have to create an entity in France, and from now on, and is already going to be active in the end of the year, you create a European company allowing you to scale. So we're all looking in how can we have much more effect and much more scale. I think the next thing to do that is based on city governance. And you can do that by saying, okay, I of course have my local adaptation, but I take the knowledge so that I can accelerate the effects of it.
And in doing so, we can become an exporter of our solutions. That's also the Green Deal.
Exactly, and at this moment, if you would look at how do you use tools, and if you look at most governments or local or national, it's basically using standard US tools. Right? I hate it when I see, we're now implementing AI, and it's like in half of the time it's people just implementing a co-pilot. And I think that's not implementing AI. And so we have to rethink that. What does it mean for our European cities? How do we embed because we're not going to create just hyperscalers to do what we want. We want to embed what we know different. And city-based governance is going to be so crucial in a European context that this is a fantastic moment to take that. Because you could say, okay, the battle has been about LLMs and these learning models. If DeepSeek and if Mistral show one thing, is that very quickly you can go in near approximate levels of performance. The next thing is interpretation of data and applications, and especially in domains that are very close to cities, to society, and to ourselves. Yesterday they announced 50%. The most moderate of the CEOs of the large of the hyperscalers is probably Amodei from Anthropic, and he said, well, from my calculation, 50% of the white-collar jobs, entry jobs, will disappear. This is the moderate guy, right? What does it mean? What does it mean for individuals and for society who identify with the job if the job is not there? How do you make cities livable? We talked about how do you deal with energy requirements for creating that good, but how do you balance that in a city? Those kind of questions, usually in a technological revolution you had time. Usually it took nearly a lifetime to have a big evolution. Now it takes every 5 years. There's a kind of the effect of a new industrial revolution arriving. And so building out the tools and learning it and connecting that, I think that's going to be the acceleration that we need, especially on a European level.
Absolutely, and it could be our unique selling proposition at the global stage in that respect. Zahra, indeed, because the article with which you won the Planet Prize is precisely in going into the direction of pooling and city brain, so to speak, at the European level. So can you react on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to reflect on what we said about, I mean, I fully agree that the building sector actually is standing for a major of the, the emissions that we have it. And what we have seen, actually we have done the study, then looking at what is the strategies there, what is the willingness, what is the politician wants to do, especially in Sweden, we want to have the fossil free. And also they have put a strategy to reduce actually emissions from these sectors. But when we did the study, we saw that even with all those strategies, we cannot become net zero by the time that they wanted 2040. And why? Because, we are using the land, we are planning, we are building, and actually we are removing the capacity of the land to store carbon, for example, in one of the cases. And this is the winning article that we had it actually, that how we can use the nature itself, to help us to be able to restore back, to give the benefits to human and also give the benefits to nature as well. So, and we call it nature-based solutions. And what I can say that actually we are working with different cities in Sweden and also different cities, abroad, that actually they want to reduce their emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions, but they don't know how they have to do it. For example, the science is there, but the tools are there, but it's not the sort of the tools that is really like helping them to understand the needs that they have it. So I have got these questions from, for example, the people in Stockholm City that, okay, can you please tell me like where we should build, where we should put like our green solutions exactly to have the most impact? Because maybe this is the easiest. If you have the money, you talk about, funding. If they have the funding, if the money issue has been solved, and I have it, but then like, okay, where I have to put these solutions to have the most impact, this is the science that is missing. And we are trying to produce this science and transfer this science to politicians, to policymakers, decision makers to understand it. So I'm just thinking like, we are not, although we have done lots of studies, we cannot say that we know everything. So we still need the cutting-edge science, and we need to be able to bring this knowledge to cities, to help them to understand that how they can use these evidence-based solutions in their daily work. And this is what we are trying to do. And then thanks to Frontier Planet Prize, with this prize, we are trying actually to step in and help and work closer and do the transdisciplinary research and work. So this is what we are doing now.
So that's really where you see the city brain positioning itself.
Exactly.
Alice, how do you, as a key player?
So before I answer your question, I'm just going to
of course.
build on the buildings piece. Just on the buildings piece, we have to break it down into commercial and housing, right? So can we transition commercial buildings? Absolutely. And I think the Netherlands has really shown us setting out the right policy context, working with the financiers, you can make it happen, right? So they had a roadmap that all commercial buildings by the 1st of January 2023 had to have a building energy rating of a C or above. They've achieved it, right? And so once the banking institutions realized that these buildings would have no value unless they lent some money for them to transition, guess what? They lent some money so they could transition. But what is really hard is housing. And particularly those that, are on low incomes, have very high mortgages, for example. That's really, really hard, and that's where we need to invest in helping those people, coming up with models to enable those houses to be retrofitted and transitioned, or apartment buildings. So that's the bit that's really, really hard. Now, to answer your question and sort of building on the comments that were made, I think one of the things that we have around the world is very different governance models in cities. In some cities, you have empowered local leaders. In some cities, you do not have empowered local leaders. They're ceremonial leaders. But in most cities around the world, one thing that cities are reliant upon is working in a multilateral system that was designed for countries rather than cities. And that means that when they want to borrow, they're completely dependent on a sovereign guarantee coming from national government. And if you have national government that has a different political persuasion than city government, then guess what? National government will stop city government trying to get that sovereign guarantee to bring forward that infrastructure project. And that's something that we see, in all parts of the world, So I think that's definitely something that we really need to empower our local leaders to a greater extent. And where we see that empowerment, we see advancement. In relation to the technology piece, listen, I've been through the smart cities bubble and ultimately bust. So what can we learn from that as we embrace AI as being talked about in the same way? I'm getting a sense of deja vu in some senses. One thing we need to remember is people. So if we're going to use any form of technology, it's to ensure that we meet the needs of people living in a city. Technology has got to be an enabler. And in the world of AI, we've got to ensure we have inclusive data. So in so many of our cities, there's groups of people that are often not included. Disabled persons, children, the elderly, refugees, women. And in the world that we're moving into, we need to ensure that the data we're gathering is inclusive of all of the residents of our cities, because if we don't, we won't make the right decisions. So that's what worries me, that we're not talking enough about quality data representing all people. The other thing is, as I do work for a multinational design engineering firm, we work right across the world, we are busy, we do have a lot of data center projects. But we're seeing the reality of building those hyperscalers in terms of the demand that it's creating for energy and water. Right now, just with the data centers that we have in the world, we're using the equivalent amount of water as the whole of India. So, I live in Dublin, in Ireland, and in Ireland, 24% of energy went to hyperscalers in the last year. And that's brought up the price of energy in the country, but it's also created conditions where it's more difficult to get permission for housing because we don't have the energy and water. So I think there's some, as we talk about AI, we also need to have discussions around the receiving environment for these hyperscalers and the alternatives to taking the energy from the system, which is also required for housing and hospitals and so on and so forth, and taking the water for the system that's equally required for that. So I think we need to start having those conversations, because what we're finding in terms of the receiving environment in countries and cities is hostility is growing because they don't necessarily create jobs, but they do demand a lot of energy and water.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, as a fronton, that's how we call ourselves. People from frontiers, we are frontons. I mean, what you said, I like that word actually. So what you said is very, very close to our mission and our heart, because, I mean, if we don't have quality open data to build the models on, to build the systems on, we will only get half-baked solutions, which will probably boomerang back to us. And what you said about energy and housing is precisely one of those things that if we do not come up with the correct models, it will boomerang back, because we will take the wrong decisions. And by the way, still, most of the science is not open. So a lot of the models which we use are based on science which is partial, which means that a lot of the knowledge that we could use for policy is actually is not used to train the models on. So we have a huge problem there. So that should also be part of our brain. And I give you the floor immediately, Bart. So that is really, really close, and energy as well. So we really have to invest in Europe, if we can, in the next generation of AI companies that use much less energy. And that is also one of the, not hobby horses, one of the passions of Frontiers is to go into that direction, that the next generation is using much less energy, because otherwise we will have an inevitable conflict there. Conradin, so as someone you said it, you have your voters behind you because of the referendum. Well,
you can never be sure. Huh?
You can never be sure. No, that's right. So it's of course a model which is unique for Switzerland. So what would you advise mayors throughout Europe to get this backing of their population? Because in the end, we have seen it in the elections all over the world. If we lose them, then we create effects we can't control anymore, going into populism and nationalism.
Absolutely. But I sign everything Alice said before. We have to strengthen the local level, the municipal level. Mayors have to be powerful to make changes in their relevant cities, and they need the tax money, of course, to launch proper own initiatives. And as you said, often cities are stopped by a higher level because other political constellations are there. But even if we have that, and I do have it in Switzerland in our system with very strong cities and cantons, even there is always the danger of losing the majority of the people. And I'm not saying the majority that elects me, I want them too, but the majority for the concrete measures we are taking towards net zero. And you, again, Alice, you mentioned one important factor, housing, the buildings. House owners with the high mortgage, how do you tell them, yeah, you should now change your heating system? I mean, you can tell them, and they say, yeah, well, but I changed it 10 years ago, and it's going on for another 20 years. I don't want to change it now. If you want to change it, you can either tell them, yeah, but you're not allowed anymore to use it. You have to do a new one, but who pays for it? You have to subsidize that. If not, people cannot afford it, or if they can afford it, they will hate you forever, and they will fight against everything you're proposing towards net zero. So this is a very difficult thing to do, and it doesn't work with making people, trying to make them a bad conscience. You really have to show them what it gives them, what it brings for them. And I mean, if I may, one example we are doing. We are acquiring, how do you say this, garbage cars, the cars that take in the garbage.
It's the same in all Europe, garbage cars don't work.
Yeah. But they're working with diesel.
Yeah.
There exist, of course, now versions with the batteries, but they are much more expensive still. And of course, if you calculate the whole life cycle, they don't need diesel power. It's not that much more expensive, but still it's more expensive. Baseline it's more expensive. So how do I convince my voters to spend more money for something we could have cheaper? And it's not enough to just say, well, it's better for the environment. It's not enough. But what convinces them is if I say, look, it comes to your house at 6 o'clock in the morning. With the diesel, it wakes you up.
Yeah.
If it's not that noisy, you maybe have the garbage people yelling at each other, but still the car now is not that noisy. And the air is less polluted if you open the window in the morning. That's what people are interested in. So we have to combine the good factors for the environment with something really concrete that the individual can hold on to and say, well, there is something in it for me too. So, okay, I'm ready to pay with my tax money for this measure.
So really connected to their daily life experience, daily life work experience. Bart, you wanted to intervene before Conradin took the floor. No. On the contrary, he jumped before you.
But first of all, I agree with everything. I would, however, also insist on some kind of sense of urgency of doing things. We often talk about, let's discuss it and let's embed that. And I think we have to discover and do that while we experiment with it. Because if we wait and we develop all the standards and everything we want before we start implementing it, it kind of reminds me of where we were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we were, and especially from the European side, looking back, we were a bit one of the leading countries. Mobile phone, I remember this article on, I think it was Fortune or somebody, with the two CEOs of Nokia and Ericsson. These guys have 96% market share. Who will ever beat them? It's 20 years ago, now 0% market share. Skype was the technology that was leading. It's still the underlying technology of Teams that we all use in the meantime. And so we said at a certain moment, yeah, but let's develop our European way of thinking and let's embed that. And 20 years later, we created 0 tech companies, and the world is suddenly nearly governed, nearly literally, by tech companies and tech dudes or billionaires, or how do I have to call them? It's a bit strange that we completely lost that. And one of the aspects is we just wait too long by doing things.
Yeah.
And trying to accelerate that and trying to learn while we do, but keeping the human central, I think that's going to be a very crucial point. How can we do that and share it as quickly as possible? But that mentality of let's do it now as quickly as possible and let's move on. And that's one of the elements that, it's not the topic of today, but I kind of like what we try to do in the European Innovation Council. Because over the last 2 years, we invested in 250 companies. So that's investment, not a grant or whatever. It's direct investment in companies from a fund initiated by the Commission. We now got 11 billion as a budget. They propose now to increase it to 35. It's already it's a certain amount. And it is initiating and accelerating European research-based innovation. So the point of the EIC is that Europe has top researchers, top research. However, it takes too long to transfer them into something that brings value, and then we take too much time to scale, so at the end there's nearly nothing left. And let's try to accelerate that. And I think the same, you could apply nearly the same kind of principle on implementing better governance tools on a city level, which at the end is going to be 60 to 70% of where we all live.
Absolutely. No, I do fully subscribe that sense of urgency, because you know, when I worked at the Commission in this area, one of our favorite expressions was US and China innovate or imitate, depending on which part of the continent you are, and Europe hesitates. And no, really, and we should, it's also learning by doing, and that's where your kind of work and the city brain comes in. Thank you very much, Alice. I'm slowly going into the direction of wrapping up, and I would like to do it as follows. It is, I mean, what I hear here is very encouraging. I do take away this idea of, you know, learning from each other, the city brain, sense of urgency. By the way, I think what is geopolitically happening is a wake-up call. And if we don't wake up, we will be broken. And that's what our Prime Minister said yesterday in the Belgian Prime Minister. It's break or wake up. And I think we are waking up, and that's the sense of urgency you were talking to. Now that, to wrap this session up, we learned, you don't know that I'm going to ask it, so be prepared. We didn't say it on beforehand. So we heard that the President of the United States will launch a big housing initiative. For sure he will not do it in Greenland, I hope. So what, based on this discussion and what you took away, what you learned here, would be in a format he can understand, meaning Twitter, what would be, or Truth Social, what would Trump Social, sorry, what would be your key advice to him based on the discussion that you learned here? You have 126 characters to answer. Okay, I'll let you think a little bit. You are a political... Bart, you can start. You're the tech guy.
And so, what advice we would give to Trump?
No, you based on what you heard today and what you learned from this discussion for his housing thing.
Do we want to help him?
I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to say one other thing, because we talk about Greenland and we talk about Venezuela. And what we don't talk about is that he took over the country in which all the teenagers live, meaning TikTok, right? All our teenagers live on TikTok, and Trump said, thank you, China, now it's American. And now it's American means also all the European people. And so I think we even underestimate the impact of how much what he is doing is bringing it to an America-central world for the moment. So I'm a bit afraid of what he's doing. So that creates, yesterday indeed, our Prime Minister said we have to wake up or break up. I think it should and has to lead to what can we do, build on what we have as a strength and accelerate it. Thanks. I really think that technology with critical thinking is going to be the game changer for us as a European continent.
No, thanks, Bart. Yes. It's almost a LinkedIn post, but okay. Zahra.
I think that as a scientist, I can say that I feel proud to do science in Europe, and I feel that how my colleagues in US are not feeling well there. So I really hope that we can work together to do the cutting-edge science together and get closer to politicians, actually, to governance, and to be able to implement, to accelerate. I loved it. Really, we need to accelerate. And this is something that we can put the focus, make it, put the action on that one and make it happen. And I really hope that we as a scientists worldwide can work together as well again, because now what's happening in US is not that good for the scientists.
That's why we have to defend open science,
yes,
by the way.
Exactly, we have to do it.
Alice.
It's hard to do, is it Truth Social he uses? It's hard to do a Truth Social post, but I think the first thing I would say is that we have a housing crisis everywhere because we tend to focus on piecemeal short-term solutions rather than solving the problem in the long term. And we need to focus on both the public sector and the private sector element to bring demand and supply into equilibrium. So what I mean by that is we will never solve the housing crisis by just the private sector building housing. So both parties have a role. Also just in terms of the length of time it takes to solve the problem. If you have a crisis, which we have, building housing won't solve your crisis. A crisis is right now. So actually the very first thing you need to know is how much housing have I got that's vacant in my city? And how much real estate have I got in my city that's vacant, that's no longer fit for purpose for its current use, whether it's offices or hotels? There's very quick ways of finding that out. So data. Electricity data, analyze your electricity data and understand which buildings are occupied and which are not. Hone in on the ones that are not occupied and how do you bring them back into use. Analyze your water data, do the same thing. So that's the immediate term, is solve your vacancy problem. But your medium term issue is how do we ensure we provide the infrastructure, water, energy, to enable us to permit development, the densification of development within your green core. And the long term is getting the strategic land assembled. So that's urban regeneration sites, for example, to ensure that your supply in the long term is sorted as well.
Thank you very much. Not a LinkedIn post. Thank you. Conradin.
I think nobody wants to help Trump here on the podium. Well, I would say to him, look, housing is a very complex thing, and you cannot just build houses. And if you build houses where you have a space for the whole society. So not social housing for the poor, not gated communities for the rich, but you have to put people together to create a sustainable environment by building new housing. I think that would be one key message.
That's our European model.
Totally.
Thank you.
And if after the round I can just tweet one thing based on everything we thought, I would tweet him, we are taking our science back.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's join maybe in a round of applause for this panel.